Welcome to the International Birch University podcast. The Department of Digital Communications and Public Relations is home to the IBU podcast studio. I am Engin Obučić, your host today. BAIR Creative Europe Large Scale Cooperation Project is a collaborative project between 9 European partners led by Radio Slovenia, which investigates the impact of sound on our environment and development. Over 100 experts from various institutions work to promote the importance of audio sensibility and address the visual-centric communication of modern media. We are joined by Saška Rakev-Berko from Radio Television Slovenia, who is the main coordinator of the BAIR project. Saška has played a key role in leading the coordination of this innovative project, bringing together experts from across Europe to collaborate and explore the role of sound in our lives. We are delighted to have Saška as a guest on the podcast today, where she will be sharing her insights and expertise on this fascinating topic. Welcome to the IBU podcast, Saška.
Thank you for inviting us.
Is this your first time in Sarajevo?
Exactly, yeah.
And what do you think so far?
Wow, I am fascinated to say so, about the softness of the language, musicality of the language, the soundscapes, on the one hand, very strong traffic, but on the other hand, laughter and very beautiful, quiet moments. So it's a very interesting experience to be here. And we are very happy to be here, the whole team.
Thank you, Saška. Can you please tell us about the BAIR project? What are its primary goals? What is the project about?
So the whole idea started from the question, what does the sound represent to people and to the world around us? Mm-hmm. And I would say what was the richness of the project is that we are 9 organizations coming from 7 European countries, but we have very different profiles. So the scope of our network range from the national radio broadcasters to universities, research institutes, and independent artistic collectives, joining artists, researchers, academics, scientists, and journalists in the research of the sound.
And where has the research led you so far? What have you discovered?
Well, it's important to point out that because we have so diverse profiles, we also have a very specific research questions, and we will later on present more in detail each of them. But there is, if I took in for the Radio Slovenia, for example, one of our research questions is related to music and medicine. We are very much interested, how the musical and sound interventions could be applied in a clinical medical setting. So we do have an expert collaboration teams of that runs under the supervision of Primari Dr. Igor Michael Raunik. He's a retired child neurologist, and under his guidance and with his support, we are developing very different activities. Among them, there is a hospital radio when we are researching how we could, through sound art, address the very specific situation of young hospitalized children, to ease their time and the time they have to spend in the hospital. So this is one of the research questions, but maybe I would just go briefly back and we'll say that our project, its name is BAIR, Sound Art for Babies, Toddlers and Vulnerable Groups. And the important thing is that really what interests us is, what is the role of sound in the whole circle of life, to say so, from the cradle, from the first days, until the old age, but not in illness and in health.
Mm-hmm. It's really fascinating to me because, we're surrounded by sound all the time, at all times. And it's just that I haven't seen projects of this nature being developed and implemented in our community, in our society. So this is a real refreshment, I would say. Well, this is as Saška said, this is a collaborative project.
Exactly.
Who are the consortium partners of the project, and what role does IBU play in the project, in the consortium? Let's put it that way, in the consortium. Yeah.
Cool. So the reason why we are here today is because we were just present at the amazing opening of the exhibition that Ibu presented, and it's called Sound Lifeline. Mm-hmm. So Ibu is basically contributing to the project an amazing research on sonic remembrance, and their work is about case study, the siege of Sarajevo. What is really intriguing is, and this is like, I would say, the model or the methodology of basically all the partners involved, that we are combining artistic research with the in-depth academic research, and that they are enriching each other. So that's it. And then other partners will present more in detail their works. So the model of the production within the project, it's also the methodology that Ibu is using, is that we are complementing artistic research with in-depth academic research, and that all this is basically developed in a long-term process. So what is sometimes a luxus to say so, so we stand for slow academic production, slow journalistic production, slow artistic production. And the idea is that the heterogeneous network of very different partners involved would enrich each other, so that we would share our different expertise, to enrich each other production.
Seems to me that Radio Slovenia is committed to the project, and it's dedicated to developing its content, I'd say. So what's the role? Would you please share with us, what's the role of Radio Slovenia within the project, within BR?
So one of the focuses related to music and medicine, but the other one is related to the question of sound art for the youngest, for babies, toddlers. The formats that we are developing together with partners is, if I point out a few of them, is like radio plays for babies. We are very much interested how we could invite sound into the cradle, and how we can, create through sound art a safe playground for the interaction between very little children and their caregivers. We are also very much interested in the dramaturgical possibilities and compositional possibilities, of composing for these very young audiences. And because we are today in the University of Architecture, we are very much interested in how to design spaces where we could listen together from early years on. So apart from the sound art for babies and their important ones, to say so, we are also developing a format of symphonic works for babies, and we commissioned 4 amazing composers of contemporary music composition to develop a specific symphonic compositions with a thought about the youngest. So we also commissioned 4 composers to develop 4 new symphonic works that we just premiered one in January with our symphonic orchestra, and there are 3 more following in the next months to come. The idea of creating the sound art for the youngest is that we really would like to sensitize, to say so, about the importance of sound, but also about the potential of sound. So if I go back to the sound art compositions for the youngest, what is very important is that apart from the Radio Slovenia, there are also 2 other partner organizations that are working and developing the same sound format. That is Radio Teater from Croatia and Baza Art Collective from Belgrade, and you will hear far more about that when...
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. Is architecture something that brings you to the International Birch University? Is that the cooperation that kind of stems out of this?
It's always very much interesting to talk also about the situations where we listen, and how, and to think about the sound in relation to the space. Yeah. So having the honor and pleasure to be collaborating with colleagues from Sarajevo really opens amazing research questions also for us who are basically putting our works in FM frequencies, in terms of, how does the sensitivities of the space show itself through sound, how do we feel the space through sound, how we can think the space through sound, how we can open the space through sound, how we can create a space that will allow us to listen together, to be together, to create a community around the sound. So there are quite a lot of, even maybe one would not say so from the first sight, intertwinement between the space, sound, architecture, urbanistic planning by the end, maybe just to say so, but Leila will later tell you more about that. The starting point of the IBU University was the question of sound pollution in Sarajevo. And then this question brought them to the question of sonic remembrance. So
Is there a specific conclusion that you have reached so far in that regard? Something that has impressed you?
Well, I would say there are a lot of insights. Also, well, one of the things is also that we are doing the evaluation of the sound artworks that we are producing, and it's very amazing to see, that sometimes what you write on the paper really functions in practice. Yeah, I mean, one of the goals for this relational sound art for babies and toddlers is that they help to nurture secure relationships through sound and create a space when the secure relationship could be formed. And the compositions that we develop are really of a very complex nature. If, for example, we develop a radio opera for children, as I mentioned before, symphonic orchestra pieces for children, and one would say, but this is not really art for babies and toddlers. But when you see, the like parents coming with the trolleys and very littles that even do not walk yet, or maybe they are a few weeks old, but then you see how they react to the sound and how sound provoke a contact between them and their loved ones, and how they start to, through sound, enter into the space, what it means that they feel good in the space and they feel secure enough. You say, wow, sound really has a strong potential, to connect us. It is amazing. And then also, as I mentioned before, there is this field of music and medicine, and the whole research that is related to that. And I will just share like a very, I won't say like just a thought, but that I think it's a very illustrative one. We were doing a series of very in-depth interviews that was led by Igor Primari Igor Mikhail Rauning, and he was inviting experts from all around the world that talked about the topics such as sound and dementia, sound and Parkinson, sound and epilepsy. And if I just share one of the sentences that really touched me, there was a musical therapist, Mihaela Kaučić, who was sharing her experience. And she basically said when her grandmother had a very strong dementia and she no longer knew who she is or, where she is, they could still connect through sound. So they were singing together the songs from her grandmother's youth. Yeah. So that just to mention how strongly embedded the sound it is in us. And it's very important to also notice that our auditory perception already developed before we are born, I think in the 27th weeks of gestation. So sound is something what is really in the prenatal consciousness. Yeah. And then it takes us till the end of the circle of life, to say so.
Indeed. Is there a certain type of sound that we prefer that calms people down or promotes mutual understanding?
What is very fascinating, and that I think this is really individual. I would not say that, we would, and this is the beauty of the sound, yeah? So that to some extent, there was and this is exactly the beauty of creating for very little ones, 1 or few days, children and very little ones, because they are not yet culturally conditioned. I would say that we develop our preferences for sound through our cultural environment, through our education. It's, I think, common that like very often, we inherited the taste. Yeah. But there was a lot of researches done, and one of them, it's amazing that they were doing a research on the very little babies, and they saw that basically babies are able to differentiate the rhythm far more in depth than the adults are. So our, auditory perception is closing down older we are becoming. But, when we enter into the world, we are like a range of possibilities, and then we go into probably different sound directions. So I'm not sure if I would say that there is a specific sound that would have the same effect on every and each of us. And I think that's exactly the beauty, because different sounds will affect us differently. And I will finish here, but I will just say that, the sound is, even though it's so intimate and so fragile and, I would say, invisible, it's really affects us wholly through body, through every cell of our body. We cannot close the ears. And researching, what everything could sound bring to the well-being, of our lives, and how we could live and work with sound, it really opens a lot of possibilities be it in education, be it in a context of medicine, be it in the context of urbanism, architecture. So yeah, and colleagues will tell you more about how they are working with the potential of sound in their specific context.
Thank you, Sashka. This has been fascinating. Since you act as part of the consortium, would you please introduce your next guest or your next colleague?
Yeah, with great pleasure. Yeah, with great pleasure. So the next colleague is Sunčica Milosavljević. He's an artistic director of artistic company coming from Belgrade, Serbia, Baza Art.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
We would like to welcome Sunčica Milosavljević now and ask her to explain the project from her side of the consortium, if I should put it that way.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. As Sashka has already explained, actually all the partners in the project have some specific focus and a very specific research question that we are exploring and trying to find innovative or at least correct answers to. And so what Baza Art is doing, and we are actually a representative association in culture from Serbia for educational and scientific research activities in culture. So our work is very much connected to education and to research. And this is exactly what we are trying to somehow establish through the project. What is the power of art in the upbringing of the child? And what we are doing is we are connecting the pedagogues and developmental psychologists and other experts who are whose field of expertise and research is the development of the child, and bringing them together in different relations with the artists and trying to create, or at least to test whether art making informed through and by pedagogical inputs can bring some new quality. And since I already know that you will ask me about the methods and the conclusions, I will tell you that it has shown that this method, or trying to work interdisciplinary in this way, isn't easy at all. It is very difficult in practice. It's very nice in theory, and it's very difficult in practice. And it is mainly the artists who are not sensitized to cooperate with the scientists. And the two processes which we try to bring together, a scientific process, which is analytical, synthetical, of course, and the creation process, which is, again, creative, don't come together so easily. We think that most probably it would be necessary to start very early in the training of both the educators and the scientists on one side and artists on the other side, in order to make such synergies easier and possible. So this is what we are doing. We are working through several disciplines, artistic disciplines, and several scientific fields. So yes, we are starting from the pedagogy field. We are moving towards the field of sound and music creativity, and then again to pedagogical field, and then to theater. And finally, we will make a kind of a performative format based on sound, but with some elements of live performance.
Thank you for informing the public, Sunčica. This has been very, very interesting and delightful.
Thank you.
Would you please introduce your colleague who will share?
Yes, I am inviting, with pleasure,
Certainly.
Katarina Krešić-Grgić, the producer of the radio theater from Zagreb, Croatia.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Katarina Krešić represents Radio Theatre Zagreb. Katarina, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Pleasure. Would you please introduce yourself? Would you introduce Radio Theatre Zagreb and tell us more about the project from your end, from your perspective?
Yes, so I'm a producer at Radio Theatre. That's a small artistic organization from Zagreb. A person that is also the director of Radio Theater is Pavlica Bajsic. She's a radio and theater author and director. And we are, as I said, a small organization, and we are trying throughout our projects and also within BR to complement radio throughout different media and throughout different relationships with the radio in primarily theater. So we are doing primarily radiophonic theater productions. And within BR, we made one new radio theater production for children. It's called Wars of the Worlds. And within that production, we did also a workshop with kids who are making radiophonic jingles through the workshop. And also the other theater production is Three That Sang from author Hrvoje Korbar. It's a story for children about instruments and how they are made, and it also with that theater play we want to teach kids about music and about also ecology and trees that they're singing through their new instruments. And through with BR that show and also workshop, musical workshop with kids was we got, because in Zagreb I think 2 years ago in Zagreb and Petrinja and cities around was a big earthquake. And it was also Corona, so COVID crisis, and so kids weren't able to, from small cities around Zagreb, weren't able to have be able. They weren't able to see a lot of theater shows and stuff, and we went at places that were hit by the earthquake with that show. And we had a lot of kids there, and it was really, really nice, and we were really glad to do that. And beside kids' children's theater plays, we also did one radio play for babies. It's called Early the Gnome, with 10 episodes, and the babies and kids are also reacting really, really well to it. And we went to organized listening sessions in kindergartens, and we are also evaluating the whole process. And with the research, we are hoping to do, and we are planning to do more theater and radio productions for babies and kids.
And what's the main conclusion you have reached so far?
That this project for radio theater, and I think for all of the partners, is, I think, never-ending project, because every time we do something new, we discover something new, and we get some motivation for doing something else and some new projects with newfound knowledge.
Thank you, Katrina. This has been very informative, and we encourage you to continue and along your path and reach those and discover gold at the end of the line. Thank you. And would you be so kind and introduce your colleague?
Yes, I would like to introduce Nicoleta Dojcimovic. She is a coordinator of BR team in RTS.
Thank you. We would now like to welcome Nicoleta Dojcimovic, Radio Television Serbia. Nicoleta is currently a coordinator of the BR project within the Radio Television Serbia. Nicoleta, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Would you please explain the project from your side, from your perspective? What conclusions have you reached? What have you been working on?
Well, Radio Belgrade, the part of Radio Television Serbia, we are, of course, doing radio shows. That's for sure. But also we are engaged or involved in dissemination and scientific work. On one hand, there are shows for and about children, about their growing up, about their problems, speech problems, for instance, or about their memories before before their birth or after that, you know. Also, on the other hand, we have radio shows about memories and sounds of elderly people, 75 plus people. And the sounds are the ones that remind them of life in the countryside, the use of machines, the war sounds, screeching of different kinds, you know. And we have all kinds of radio shows, like radio plays, we have radio documentaries, radio dramas, radio games, sound workshops. We also have a music composition for babies and toddlers. So that's briefly what we are doing. And also those shows represent at the competitions and the festivals, you know, like Karl Schuka or Pre-Italia or Premio Sondes. I think that's it.
Interesting. Thank you so much.
How did we conclude, actually? Okay,
yes.
for the end, that radio don't have to be only talk and music, that could be sound and research. Scientific research.
That's a great point. Radio, to me, has always been about sound, and now I'm very happy to see that actually it's being researched from the perspective that you have just explained to us. So, thank you very much for that.
I would like to call actually my colleague Heikki Uimoren. He's from Finland, from University of Eastern Finland.
All right, thank you. We're now joined by Professor Heikki Uimonen, University of East Finland. Professor Uimonen is concerned with, or is rather working with within the field of cultural studies.
Yeah, indeed,
and welcome to IBU, Professor.
Thank you.
Would you please explain the current state, the progress of your research concerning the BA project?
Our part of the pre-BA project is related to with sound memories. I think a couple of my colleagues already mentioned this. And with my colleague Helmi Järviluoma, she's Professor Emerita from University of Eastern Finland. And we are very much interested in sounds and remembering. And I think when we asked to join the consortium, we thought that it would be nice to bring our radio program called Evening of Sounds to the wider audience, which means that the Evening of Sounds is the program which has been around in Finnish broadcasting company since 2013, and it's a 3-hour live broadcast that broadcasts environmental sounds. People call to the program and ask about the sounds of their childhood and agricultural sounds of today, digital sounds, whatever comes to my mind. We have comes to their mind. We have thematic programs such as, like I mentioned, digital sounds or nostalgic sounds and whatever, disappearing sounds. And we thought that it would be nice to have this kind of program. And this is combined with interviews with elderly people in care homes, because we also want to preserve the old sound heritage of those who still remember what it was like in the 30s or in the 40s, even in the 20s. And we very much think that sounds are as any cultural artifacts, that they need to be preserved for the future generations. And we have a background as music scholars and ethnomusicologists. So it's kind of a natural thing to expand this kind of thinking to environmental sounds, because it surrounds us and it affects everything we do, and we construct the sound the way we do, and we interact with the sounds, and so it seems to be everywhere, and it's very much worth researching.
Have you received the feedback from the individuals the target group you've been researching?
It's seemingly quite pleasant. We've been interviewing quite a few people before that, so we have a vast record of interviews in our archives. And now that we have visited elderly homes or care homes, people seem to be, for instance, if there are 2 or 3 or 4 people participating to research, they seem to find it pleasing. At least they haven't told me that. They've not told us that they don't like it, because it's quite nice to have hour and a half and talk about the good old times or the bad old times, because sound doesn't have to be a nice one all the time, and that's what we also aim to do in our program. It's not just pleasant sounds. It's just it can be very annoying as well, and unpleasant or indifferent. You might have an indifference relation to sound, and it's a very wide-reaching topic.
It seems to evoke memories, pleasant memories.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Immonen. It has been very informative, very evocative. Thank you so much. Would you please introduce your colleague now?
I will. Our next guest is Professor Leila Odobasic-Novo here at the International Birch University. Welcome.
Okay. Well, I would like to welcome Professor Leila Odobasic-Novo. Leila, we know each other because Leila is a professor at the Department of Architecture at International Birch University. Leila, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Would you please continue this line of great speakers and share with us the role of IBU, of International Birch University, within the consortium, and your role within the project?
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for organizing this great podcast. Well, as you know, I'm the coordinator in front of IBU, and our work package, as Sashka mentioned, primarily was supposed to be looking into sound as pollution. But as we got into researching the real pollution effects of sound in our current context, we realized that it's really about sonic memory more, and pollution as a means of sonic memory in terms of the war. In the local context, most people have been affected, whether first-hand or second-hand, the second generation. And so we decided to take that path instead. So our research consists of testimonies. We've interviewed 15 local witnesses that lived through the siege, and they have been interviewed here at IBU. We've transcribed the interviews, and the entire research framework is based around their narratives. They vary in ages, gender, and their role within the siege itself. After we've concluded, or not concluded, but after analyzing their stories, we're resting on 2 primary tracks. So we have the research component, but we also have artistic production that complements the research. And as Sashka was mentioning, we just opened up our exhibition Sound Lifeline at the Historical Museum of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and there you can see the 3 research components. So we have the documentary film, which is basically the summary of those testimonials. And then we are working with 2 artists, Haris Sahacic and Mirsada Zecho, who have done compositions, musical compositions. One is an electroacoustic composition, which Haris has composed for us, and the other one is a sound composition. So Haris Sahacic has composed an electroacoustic composition, again based on the testimonials, but it's a recreation of the sounds of the war in a very specific manner. He composed it as a symphony. And so it's sort of an attempt at recreating these memories. So we have the component of listening of the sounds during the siege, of listening to the testimonials of the people, repeating those memories, and then the recreation of those same sounds. The idea was also to allow the people who lived through the siege and who carry those memories to be able to face them once again, but in a safe environment and also in a very specific way, not to re-traumatize people, but it's an act of refacing memories. And then the third piece by Mirsada really deals with this element of music as therapy, or music as a potentially music as a healing moment. And so each three pieces have a very different role, but they kind of tie in together. And of course, then there's a research component that we're working on at the same time. So we're looking to publish a scholarly article and then a final publication at the end. If you're going to ask me about conclusions of some sort,
I might ask you.
Like Katerina was saying, I don't think there are direct conclusions per se, but it's an ongoing field, and it's something that needs to be further explored. But we read our book, come to our exhibition, and then you will. I think you can make conclusions for yourself, not just you, but hopefully all the listeners. So thank you very much,
Leila. So you have just, we'll have to buy the book and read it, and then we can take it up with you. Can we discuss it with you afterwards?
Yes. It's going to be available for free at the end of the project. So we'll make sure to disseminate it, and for all of our listeners who are interested in the topic. So should I maybe introduce our next guest?
I think that would be a great idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Yorgos Samantas from Twix Lab from Greece. He's an anthropologist and a sonic artist, sonic engineer. He will tell you more. I apologize if I got that term right. So he's up next.
All right. We would now like to welcome Yorgos Samantas. Yorgos is a sound engineer, sound anthropologist, to be specific. Yorgos, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Enge, right?
And yes, Leila introduced you in a really special manner. So please tell us where, what the progress, or tell us about your project. What is it that you're doing right now?
Within BIA, actually, our work package is called Audibility, and we are concerned with the experience of sound and music with the deaf and hard of hearing. So that's been a very, very intriguing research project. So we're after some academic inquiry. But before that, our field work is also very, very exciting because it involves a pedagogical level. So we're working mostly with kids in their teenagehood, and we're proposing artistic tools of artistic education through sound and music, and we're kind of filling a gap here within the Greek educational system because, and this is not just about Greece, it's more generalized, possibly misunderstanding or a stereotype, so to speak, that the deaf and hard of hearing have no relation to sound or music. So we're proposing ways of how to fill in this gap. And of course, at the same time, we're trying to address to more general audiences towards the deconstruction of the stereotype.
What are some of the ways that you're using to address this issue?
Actually, we're using extensively the notion and practices of what we call sensory translation. So how to translate sound into other modalities, other senses. That involves, of course, technological applications. For example, vibrotactility. So how does this, and that goes very close to the physics of sound. Sound is vibration. Sound is waves, right? So we can feel them and we can also see them. So we're also using translation to visuals, something I think sound designers are very acquainted with. For example, you see sound while you're cutting, while you're editing, before, sometimes even without needing to listen to it, right? So you can see sound waves, or you can translate sound into shape, form, and color through spectrograms. But furthermore, we're also using conceptual tools coming from the field of art and music, like graphical scores, methodologies coming from acoustic ecology, deep listening techniques, attentive listening into the environment. So we're proposing them as questions and as educational methodologies in order to create or co-create with the children their pieces of work while learning.
Any conclusions so far? I tend to ask this question about
conclusions. Yeah, it's always an awkward question, right? I think the answer is artworks, art. This is what we can make sense out of a particular artwork, and every work has its own approaches, its own, let's say, outcomes. And I think the way we see and understand or hear provides further understandings of how is it to relate to sound and music, being deaf or not being deaf.
Thank you so much for this. It's really fascinating, and we certainly look forward to, learning more about the outcomes of the project. Thank you so much. Would you like to introduce your colleague?
Of course. We're very happy to have with us, I believe, Giuseppe Gavazza from Conservatory of Cuneo, but also the Cresson and Sager partner, right?
And now we are joined by Professor Giuseppe Gavazza, Cresson and Sag, Grenoble, France. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
We've heard a lot about the BEER project. We've listened to different perspectives that your colleagues have approached the project from. Would you please share your own perspective?
Oh, well, I think I can explain, introducing a little bit what is Cresson. Cresson means Centre de Recherche pour l'Environnement Sonore, so Research Center on the Sonic Environment, and is an architectural educational center that put together several pluridisciplinary research team, crossroad of engineering, architecture and human science, as of course architect, urbanist, as well as sociologist, anthropologist, philosopher, geographer, and artist, especially musician, of course. Yeah. So was founded in the building and in the activity of Superior School of Architecture in Grenoble more than 40 years ago. And the specificity and the originality for that period is an approach to architecture, urbanism, and what we call now ambience from the point of listening and not from the point of view. So giving attention to the sound, giving attention to the listening, giving attention to the sonic ambient. So this is the main line of the research of the lab which I collaborate. I am a musician. I live in Italy, and I teach in the music conservatory in Italy. But I have this research part. Grenoble is not so far from Turin, where I live, so I can switch my activity.
Certainly. What have you learned so far, the project?
Well, it's interesting. For me, was the project is, for me, is starting in some way, because we cross several, 9, it seems, different institution, competence, skills, that have one common point, that is the sound, the listening, and was very fertile, this cross between also different nations, because we have France, Italy, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Greece, Finland. So really it was a very open, a very wide perspective on with the common love, finally, with the common love, the common passion for the listening and the sound. And this is, I think, very fertile for the future. I think also in perspective as a teacher, to have contact with the realities like university, radio, research center, that can be a good synergy with the normal activity of a musician or a researcher in the field of the sound.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Gavazza. I feel inspired already. The project, the BEER project, seems to be highly inspiring. I'm a musician too, and I see the value of it. Indeed, it's special indeed. Yeah.
Okay, so open your ear.
Happy
New Year, like Cage.
That's a great gift, Fred. Thank you so much. Would you please introduce your colleague?
Who's Gregor? Gregor Pierce is a musician too and come from Ljubljana. Is correct?
All right, it's a pleasure to now to introduce Mr. Gregor Pirš, Radio Television Slovenia. This is the ARS program, or the third radio program. Did I get this right?
Absolutely, of Radio Slovenia.
Of Radio Slovenia, that's important to pronounce. All right, I understand, Gregor, you're a musician too. So would you please share your perspective of a musician on the BER project? What have you been researching?
So as first, thank you for inviting us, having us here, because it's really
pleasure.
It's such a pleasure to be on the final meeting of the consortium in Sarajevo. This is I've never been here before, and I have to say it was my long time wish to come here. So I'm here now. That's great, and
it's a pleasure having you.
Brilliant things and very deep things in artistic sense are happening here, or we have now gone through. So I'm so happy not to miss this opportunity. Otherwise, I'm a composer and also a cellist. I'm a head of music of the third program of Radio Slovenia, which somehow puts me into the position that for decades I'm taking care about contemporary music. My focus has always been how to promote, stimulate, present contemporary new works, so the music, artistic music, this is ranging from so-called serious music to jazz, stimulating new works, presenting them on tribunes and so on. So somehow this live pulse is what I want to somehow feel within the radio program. And we are also trying to bring this live pulse, this creativity to radio. This has been so from eternity. So it happened that Saška Rakev-Perko, back in maybe 2018 or 19, we started discussing this possibility, how to join forces between radio drama and music to bring this point of connecting the, we said, virgin human soul, babies, toddlers, vulnerable groups, and finally all of us, to connect this with so-called serious art. In my case, that was, of course, serious musical art. This is not the kind of art that would attract a lot of listeners. We are not listening to it in stadiums, you know. It's just more intimate. We're happy if the halls are half full and so on. So you really need to have certain special effort to actually understand it. And there was this funny question that appeared to me, because I have to confess, at the beginning I did not really believe Saška, which came with an idea that toddlers and babies are capable of perceiving very, very demanding artistic stuff. So I said, my God, are we going to project concerts? Okay, let's make concerts for general public. They maybe bring some toddlers and babies along. And finally, we finished up with pure concerts for babies and toddlers. And maybe if they invite their parents, it's their thing, but they are really in focus. So there was this main question. You know, people were asking me, do you think that toddlers and babies need contemporary art? I mean, normally the art, the kind of art we make for babies and toddlers is specialized. It's like nice lullabies or no. Now we are inviting big composers, like, you know, maybe Beethoven's of the 20th century, to compose for them. I said, you know, well, I don't know. I don't have a kid, to be honest, but I'm basically pretty sure that it will benefit them. But on the other hand, I'm pretty much sure that the contemporary music needs babies, toddlers, and this reflection on how sound affects virgin human psyche, so to say, as we defined in this prototype of the project. And also we added that we want to have, or we want to promote another kind of radio. This is the radio that can be informative, of course, can be also somehow disseminating nice music, but can also be very, very reflective, demanding, and connecting not just politicians, but also scientists and artists and journalists. So that was the starting point, that was the idea, and we then added the third point, that is an innovative radio platform to bind all this quite a broad, almost uncontrollable spectrum of possibilities that have already been presented here from different angles of partners. That was so-called AIR platform. This is a platform to like an innovative radio station that I will maybe explain just a bit later. So if I return back to the first ever concert for babies, toddlers, and vulnerable groups that we performed on 21st of January in the Studio 26 of Radio Slovenia with a symphony orchestra of RTV Slovenia and with Catherine Larsen-Maguire conducting, very good and renowned conductor. Playing, actually, they performed a piece from Slovenian composer Larisa Vrhunc, entitled So Quiet. With a lot of reflection. There is 3 pages long list of literature that the author went through, of course, following also many of our contents that we provided in the frame of the BR project, like webinars, films, other artistic productions, to decide how to make a concept that would be sustainable and useful for babies and toddlers to perceive, because this is, as I said, serious music. So we put the orchestra all around the studio. We put it on a bit higher grounds to protect the crucial instruments. And then we put nicely some comfy chairs and nice soft stuff, some cushions and so on, along with 2 instruments with metal washers and feathers that could be played by the toddlers and so on. So it was partly interactive. It was, of course, partly also improvisational, because we didn't want just to put the youngsters into a position to somehow to be there and wait, and then the music starts. That might frighten them. So when they entered, there was introductory improvisation. Then the piece started, and while they were leaving, it was some music as well there. So we completely adapted so-called concert ritual for that purpose. There was that was a very deep experience. I have to say that we also performed a general rehearsal for so-called babies and toddlers and children with multiple disabilities, so to say. We didn't know what to expect, how these young people will react. Maybe they will be terrified and so on. So we predicted that something like that would happen, and of course informed the parents to bring them out and so on. But finally we found out these are the deepest listeners. I will never forget the faces of these people that of course, the society is a bit cautious about, because they maybe don't have some expected skills. I had this feeling they have much deeper experience with this demanding classical music stream that was unfolding all around them. So I have to say, then I said, Sascha Rakev-Perko, thank you, because you've taken us through all the way, so that we really persisted to do such kind of specialized concert. And then, of course, we got a lot of praise and good feedback from the parents, from toddlers, from the chief conductor, from people that were observing, and they say, "Oh my God, this is so interesting. We could easily make a series of such a concert in Ljubljana now." Yeah. So that's the aspect we are talking. We are talking about possibility of lasting changes in mentality of, starting from radios, then cultural politics. Anybody that's fixed on certain levels and certain levels of expectations, what culture is. So we are trying to soften that and maybe produce some soil for this grass to grow green in new, unexpected directions. So, as I already explained, there is also this third technological point, so-called air platform that we are developing with our partner, the Josef Stefan Institute, the main technological innovative institution, public institution in Ljubljana, in Slovenia. And we conceived this platform as an innovative web radio channel that would be an artistic work in itself, kind of artistic declaration. So we developed by now a platform that is capable of joining musicians in live projects. This is now a very common thing, but the idea comes from the times before Corona. Somehow all their inputs, all the tracks of their inputs are stored in what we call the air subconscious, kind of course, multiple storages, and it's nicely documented, and we are storing tracks and masters and everything. And on the top of that, we are now implementing the second phase, the automatic sound engineer. This is already been done by now in pure data. And also a system of decision making to produce new context of the chunks of the stored material. So all this will be presented anew and anew and anew. We keep evolving somehow. And here we are planning to implement certain possibilities that machine learning actually offers. We will probably not come very far because there is not a lot of input data by now, but it's a start of this air thing, which was declared to become, after a certain period of usage, a sound sculpture that feeds on sonic memories and actually has been granted or lives its eternal life in far into future, or at least that lasts till the end of our digital era. So something cumulative, and we are, of course, planning to build a community around that, a community of artists and scientists. So that would be the third point, a bit exotic and very technological. I would say, if you ask me what we really learned from that project, I would say that we learned that it's always worth to believe in things, however impossible they seem, and however disconnected in certain regard. But we we have to use actually a lot of intuition, a lot of artistic feeling to join all these fields. Sometimes just an idea, just the mental factor is not enough. Because when we start thinking about it, we can maybe even go mad. It's just a thing too large. But finally, when we settle down and we continue with what we consider our calling, somehow everything settles down. And I think that BR, of course, will finish till the year of 2023, but this will not be the last words said about what we actually initiated here. I strongly believe it will continue after the official end date.
Thank you so much, Gregory. It's certainly a very fascinating project, and I look forward to learning more about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the next guest is Mr. Jan Jona Jaworšek from the Network Infrastructure Center of the Josef Stefan Institute in Ljubljana.
Okay, we would like now to welcome Jan Jona Jaworšek, Josef Stefan Institute, the head of Josef Stefan Institute.
Yes, I'm actually the head of the Network Infrastructure Center. The institute is quite large, and it usually is involved in projects in a slightly different capacity. Here we are more in the role of technical support. But in our view, science and knowledge are applied as technology, and it does not have to be industry that does the application. We are actually very interested in this kind of collaboration where we could apply technology in the context of culture or on different approaches to research and knowledge. And not just by providing our infrastructure, which is in this case mostly the network support and the support for web technologies and knowledge technologies, but also because we can then learn how to present knowledge and how to interact with people in a more deep way. For us, it's very important to collaborate with a project that includes ideas such as slow journalism, or for me, the term deep journalism would probably be more resonating, because we think that very often areas are presented in depth only for specialists or interest groups, and the general public is never even offered the chance to understand either science or art in a more precise or more accurate fashion. When we discussed this project with my colleagues at the beginning, it resonated with me because of another idea. Often in general journals, you meet a lot of information about some activities, such as movies or sports. And if you don't think about it, you don't understand that this is actually a part of a concentrated public relations effort. And sometimes I think that in the arts and also in science, we don't think enough about how we could present our activities in a more interesting, more engaging way, but also in a more approachable way to the general public. And when I see a project that approaches all kinds of public, not just the already interesting parts, but also youngsters, people that normally wouldn't be in contact with this kind of art, I think it's really the good approach to not just to get more public, but to get better participants for the future. And I've been thinking about this, for example, when we had the open day at the Institute and we interacted with young people that came to see what we are doing. And it was exactly this kind of activity, not just because it is directly engaging with the public, but because I remember that most of the people that participate on our side then remember that this was their first engagement with our institute. And similarly, this kind of project, this kind of effort is usually the first kind of engagement with creative art, sound art, but most especially thinking about these subjects for the people that will become artists in these areas in the future. And it's for this reason that we have been all very, very interested in participating in the project. but it was also kind of a pleasure for us because, it is rewarding if you say that you have constructed extremely fast network or provided very fast data access for some kind of a very complicated research purpose that only a limited public will understand. But when you can use the same facilities for something that can approach completely different people, it's so much more rewarding in a way. But at the same time, of course, it goes both ways. In the past, we had many encounters with people that became collaborators, long-time collaborators of the Institute, either from the arts or for philosophy, and we are looking to continue this kind of work in the future.
And where do you see yourselves, let's say, within a year? Where will the project head?
Well, on one side, we do not presume to dictate or project what the artistic participants in the project want to do. But in the proposal already, we promised, of course, to not just continue the technological support, but also that all the software that is developed either by our artistic collaborators or our programmers from the company 7/9 or our researchers will be in public accessible, so free software licenses, and also made available to international community. So we are, of course, going to also continue the support to the website and the repositories and facilities. So we expect this project to be a point of growth that will continue in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in. This has been a rather interesting podcast. We've had several guests and have enjoyed every word of it. The BER is a fascinating project and we commend it to you. The Department of Digital Communications and Public Relations is home to the IBU podcast. Thank you.